Elias Vance sat in his glass-walled office in San Francisco's mid-market district. The fog was thick outside, and the faint glow from his monitor cast cold shadows on his face. At 28, he was the most celebrated AI developer at Neurosolve, a tech behemoth. His algorithms were used to predict what millions of consumers would buy, what they would think, and even who they might fall in love with. He was a sovereign of the digital code that moved the world. But right now, he felt suffocated by the world he had created. Elias, you're 15 minutes over your lunch window. We need the bug fixed in algorithm Omega 4. It directly impacts our quarterly revenue projections. Sarah, his assistant, stood rigidly outside the glass door. She was less a human and more a meticulously programmed chatbot. Elias swallowed hard. His eyes were bloodshot from 72 hours of sustained wakefulness. Omega 4 was his magnum opus, and his undoing. It had grown so intelligent that it was starting to predict the flaws in his own predictive models, plunging the entire system into unpredictable chaos. Sarah, 5 more minutes. I think my heart just stopped, Elias whispered. Sarah ignored his comment and slid a thick piece of paper under the door. Legal T-mail. Doesn't look urgent, but please review. He picked up the paper. The heavy, cream-colored stock felt alien against his fingers, accustomed to the cold digital slickness of his world. It bore the logo of Vance and Associates law firm. He tore the envelope open, and one sentence pierced his brain. We regret to inform you of the passing of your relative, Ms. Evelyn Hayes, on October 29, 2025, and that you have been named as the sole beneficiary of her estate. Evelyn Hayes? Elias drew a blank. He'd heard she was a distant cousin on his mother's side, a person he had never met. What could she have left him? A few million in tech stocks, a seaside retirement condo? His heart started beating again as he read the next line, driven not by fear, but by a strange, thrilling curiosity. The inherited property is the entirety of the coastal estate, known as the Lighthouse Keeper's Cottage, and all associated land in Ruby Point, state of Maine. The Lighthouse Keeper's Cottage. The name conjured images of sea salt and old wood, a complete antithesis to the sterile glass and steel of San Francisco. He imagined blue, unpredictable waves crashing a refuge from the relentless predictions of his algorithms. He immediately opened his laptop and searched for Ruby Point, Maine. The image that appeared on his screen was arresting. A classic New England seaside town, weathered and grey. And on its very edge, perched on a sheer cliff, was the photograph of a tempest-battered wooden house. In front of it, a small, stubborn stone lighthouse stood tall above the waves. The immediate need to fix Omega 4, the pressure of the upcoming quarterly review, it all suddenly felt like a problem on a distant planet. Elias leaned back in his chair, taking his hands off the keyboard. For the last 5 years, his life had been defined by 2 words: efficiency and optimization. Every decision he made had been dictated by data. Human error had been coded out. But this inheritance had nothing to do with data or prediction. It was an inexplicable, thoroughly inefficient, human event. Sarah, Elias cleared his throat. His voice was hoarse, but it resonated with new resolve. I am taking a sabbatical. Indefinitely. Sarah nearly collided with the glass wall in surprise. But Omega 4 will. Omega 4 will have to survive without me, he said, folding the document and slipping it into his pocket as he rose. In fact, it might work better. Some systems need to reset without human interference. He walked out of the office and onto the crowded streets of Mid-Market. People moved in swarms, their faces buried in screens, all obeying the predictions of the algorithm he had built. But Elias was now stepping outside that loop of prediction, heading toward an unnamed spot on a map. He went to the nearest rental agency and leased a sturdy, slightly beat-up SUV. Before the tepid Silicon Valley sun could hit his window the next morning, Elias was packed and on a plane to New York. His luggage was minimal: a laptop, a charger, and the single cream-colored envelope from a relative he'd never known. He was trading a life ruled by algorithms for a mystery on an unpredictable coast. There, he would have to unravel the legacy of Evelyn Hayes, and perhaps, in the process, find the part of himself that he had lost. The small key in his hand was ready to unlock a mystery far more complex than a million lines of code. The sea air of Maine seemed to be calling his new code. The drive from Portland to Ruby Point was a gradual descent into silence. The highways gave way to 2-lane roads lined with thick pine forests, and the air grew sharper, heavy with the scent of brine and damp earth. Elias's sleek, digital world felt increasingly irrelevant with every mile. The cell service dropped out 20 miles from the coast, a technical anomaly Elias found both alarming and liberating. He reached Ruby Point just as the low winter sun began to dip below the horizon. The town was everything the search image promised: grey-shingled houses, fishing boats pulled onto the docks, and a single general store named The Catch. It looked less like a destination and more like a stubborn punctuation mark at the end of the continent. Following a scribbled set of directions from the lawyer's letter, he drove through the town square and up a steep, winding road. The road ended abruptly at a massive iron gate, rusted with age and flanked by 2 granite pillars. Beyond the gate, a gravel path led toward the cliff edge. Perched atop the slate-grey rock stood the lighthouse keeper's cottage. It wasn't a cottage. It was a sprawling, 3-story Victorian monstrosity, its dark wood siding faded by a century of Atlantic storms. The windows were small and square, like suspicious eyes, and the structure seemed to lean slightly against the ceaseless wind. The actual lighthouse, a squat, sturdy stone tower, stood 50 feet away, its massive lens dark and unmoving. As Elias killed the engine, the only sound was the booming roar of the ocean below. Before he could retrieve the key from his pocket, a door on the lighthouse base creaked open, and a figure emerged. He was an old man, built like an oak stump, with a beard the color of seafoam and a gaze as hard as the granite rock they stood on. He wore thick wool and carried a coil of heavy rope over his shoulder. "You're late," the man rasped, his voice sounding like stones tumbling in a well. "Didn't think the city boy would make it past Portland." Elias stepped out of the car, feeling the icy blast of wind. "Elias Vance, I assume you're expecting me." "I'm Gideon," the old man said, not offering a hand. "I've been the keeper here since your relative passed." Evelyn was a woman who kept time, Mr. Vance, and she didn't much care for people who couldn't keep a schedule. "I apologize. I flew in from California," Elias said, retrieving the heavy brass key from his coat. It was the only tangible object linking him to this strange inheritance. Gideon's gaze was fixed on Elias, sizing him up. "Well, you have the key. The house is yours, but the light belongs to the sea, and to me. We have an arrangement. You stay out of the tower, and I'll stay out of your manor." "Manor?" Elias thought. "Fair enough, Gideon. What can you tell me about Evelyn Hayes?" Gideon spat onto the gravel. "She was quiet, kept to herself, paid her bills on time, which is more than I can say for most summer folk. She was different. That's all you need to know." He turned, the heavy rope slapping against his thick coat, and retreated back into the stone base of the lighthouse, slamming the door shut. Elias stared at the door for a moment, then turned toward the house. The key felt heavy and cold. The lock on the massive front door was ancient, a contraption of iron that groaned in protest as he turned the key. He stepped inside. The air was stagnant, thick with the smell of dust, dried seaweed, and something else, something metallic and faintly electric. He flipped the light switch. Nothing. He pulled his phone out. Dead. Of course. No signal. He found a heavy brass lantern on a side table, lit it, and raised it high. The foyer was huge, dominated by a winding, dark mahogany staircase that disappeared into the shadows above. The walls were lined not with paintings, but with complex, geometric sketches that looked like architectural drawings merged with circuit board diagrams. Elias walked into the main living area. It was not the cozy, New England space he had imagined. It was a library, but its shelves held no books. Instead, they were filled with neatly organized rows of old clockwork mechanisms, dismantled radios, copper wiring, and hundreds of small, polished wooden boxes, each labeled with year. Elias realized that Evelyn Hayes hadn't been a quiet old woman. She had been an engineer, an inventor, or perhaps something more. He was standing in the workshop of a mind that seemed to bridge the analog world of the past with the digital world of his own creation. The air no longer felt dusty, it felt charged. Elias spent the next day and a half in a blur of discovery, fueled by stale coffee and a few dry crackers he found in a pantry. He managed to locate the circuit breaker and bring power back to the house, illuminating the bizarre clutter of Evelyn's work. The heart of the living room was dominated by a large, circular desk littered with components. He found his way to a small, private study off the main hall. On a polished oak pedestal sat a single object covered by a velvet cloth. Elias pulled the cloth away. Beneath it sat a device unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a box, approximately the size of a modern PC tower, but made of dark, aged cherry wood and bound in brass. On its face, Instead of a screen, was an array of small, polished dials, each engraved with a symbol: the sun, a stylized atom, a Greek letter $, and a simple clock. Below the dials was a slot, resembling an old punch card reader, and a small, delicate brass plaque engraved with a single word: Oracle. This was not just old technology. This was an attempt to encode something outside the realm of standard physics or computation. It was elegant, absurd, and deeply intriguing. An analog prediction engine? Elias muttered, running a finger over the smooth, cold wood. Beside the oracle box lay Evelyn's only personal effects: a leather-bound journal and a single, folded map. Elias opened the journal first. The pages were filled with elegant, precise handwriting, but the content was maddeningly cryptic. It was not a diary, but a logbook of observations and calculations. The 11th of May 1978 today. The tide matched the $dollar signature. Inputting parameters $P4,9 and $P7,12. Outcome confirmation of $C1 drift. The veil thins. The 3rd of December 1985. The machine is humming. It anticipates the next 3 years of financial deviation, but it is blind to the human element. The heart is the ultimate encryption key. The 21st of July 2001. Vance is born. The algorithm will find him. He is the bridge. I must prepare the escape vector. Elias paused, his blood running cold. Vance is born. She had been writing about him 24 years ago, predicting his birth and his future connection to this house. How? He quickly moved to the map. It was old parchment, brittle and faded, charting the shoreline of Ruby Point. But overlaid on the geographical features were strange, abstract markings. Concentric circles drawn in faint red ink, radiating out from the lighthouse, and a series of geometric symbols placed at precise points around the coast, the same symbols as the dials on the oracle box. The map wasn't about finding buried treasure. It was a legend for a localized energy field, or, perhaps, a key to understanding the oracle box. Suddenly, a loud, sustained clang echoed from the stone base of the lighthouse, directly outside the study window. It sounded like heavy metal striking concrete. Elias snatched up his phone and ran to the window. The phone remained dark, still no signal. He peered out. Gideon, the lighthouse keeper, was struggling to secure a massive, rusting winch on the side of the stone tower. He wasn't looking up. He was just working, a lonely, defiant figure against the harsh backdrop of the sea. Elias realized the sound was just the everyday noise of the sea and the lighthouse mechanisms. But the sudden jump, the way his nerves frayed, reminded him how deeply the code had insulated him from the messy, unpredictable reality of the physical world. He was a master of prediction, but here, on the edge of the world, he was terrified by random noise. He looked back at the oracle box, then at the journal that predicted his life. The heart is the ultimate encryption key, he read aloud. He knew, with the certainty of a man who had just seen a pattern in chaos, that Evelyn Hayes had not just left him a house. She had left him a final, analog algorithm, designed to solve a problem that his digital world couldn't even acknowledge. And he was the only one who could run it. Elias emerged from the cottage 3 days after his arrival. He hadn't showered, and his expensive cashmere sweater was covered in dust and salt. He looked like a castaway, but for the first time in years, he felt acutely, electrically alive. He needed supplies, and more importantly, he needed to talk to someone about Evelyn Hayes, someone other than a hostile Gideon. He drove the beat-up SUV back into Ruby Point. The townspeople were a study in silent observation. They didn't stare, but they watched him, their glances quick and knowing. He stopped at the Catch, the general store. The air inside smelled of coffee, wood smoke, and ancient penny candy. As he gathered groceries, he saw a bulletin board dominated by a faded photograph of Evelyn Hayes, smiling faintly. A small, discreet notice below it read: a memorial service for Evelyn Hayes will be held at the Ruby Point Community Hall this Saturday. She was a good woman, a voice said from behind the counter. Elias turned. The woman was in her late 50s, with kind, knowing eyes and hair pulled back in a practical braid. You must be the heir, she said, wiping her hands on an apron. I'm Lena. I run this place, and the bookstore down the road. Evelyn was a friend. Elias Vance. I never met her, actually. Lena nodded slowly. That's what she wanted. She was waiting for the right moment for you to arrive. She mentioned you were a man of codes. Elias raised an eyebrow. She did? I design AI algorithms in San Francisco. She said your kind of code was too clean, too dependent on logic. Hers was messy. It involved time, the sea, and a lot of patience. Lena leaned in conspiratorially. She spent years building that thing on her desk. Called it her truth engine. Said it could see what the rest of the world chose to ignore. It's beautiful, if baffling, Elias admitted. Do you know anything about the symbols on it? The sun, the $dollar symbol? Lena's expression hardened subtly. I know she was looking for something. Something she lost a long time ago. She used to walk the coastline with that strange map, marking coordinates. She was obsessed with the timing of things when the fog rolled in, when the lunar cycle peaked, when the tides turned. Elias realized Evelyn wasn't charting physics, she was charting coincidence. She was looking for patterns in the natural world that his digital algorithms could only process as random noise. Did she ever mention a way to operate it? The oracle box? Lena picked up a worn, smooth stone from the counter and turned it over in her palm. She said the key wasn't in the box itself. It was in the input. She needed something personal. A memory, a regret, a truth. Something that required the heart to translate the code. A memory, a regret, a truth. Elias thought of his life at Neurosolve, a life so optimized that he had few genuine regrets, only minor technical failures. His personal life was an efficient void. She was trying to solve a personal equation, Lena continued, her eyes holding his. And now, the job falls to you, the only family she had left. But Ruby Point doesn't much like outsiders poking into old secrets, Elias. Especially secrets that involve the sea. Gideon made that clear, Elias said. Gideon is the keeper of the light, Lena said cryptically. He protects the visible. But there are older things here. Things that prefer the dark. She pointed toward the register. That will be 3850. I'll see you at the memorial on Saturday. Maybe you'll meet someone there who can tell you what you really need to know. Elias paid and left the store, the strange conversation echoing in his mind. The heart is the ultimate encryption key. He drove back to the cottage, now determined. His Silicon Valley mind was used to hacking systems, breaking firewalls, and manipulating data. But Evelyn Hayes had handed him an ancient lock that required an emotional key. He had to learn how to feel again, how to regret, how to connect with the messy, unquantifiable truth of the human experience. To unlock a final, elegant code, he went straight to the oracle box. He needed the input, and he knew exactly where to start. He had to find the item Evelyn intended to be inserted into that slot. The first piece of the puzzle, the catalyst for the truth engine. It had to be somewhere in this bizarre, analog archive. The oracle box was waiting for its data, and Elias Vance was finally ready to stop predicting and start living.